So let's go ahead and finish up with schedule part two. So essentially we went over the morning routine and I hounded it pretty much so. And so what I want to focus on today specifically is really what we do with the middle part of our day, right? And so now there's a few things to kind of keep in mind. Typically when we do this in the middle of the day, we're looking at around anywhere from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m., right? It's typically where we will take our break in the middle of the day. And now, just remember, when I say 12 to 1 p.m., I'm in the East Coast, right? So if you're Central, if you're Mountain, Pacific, you can do the math, but essentially we want to take it around there because the majority of our leads are East Coast, right? So at 12 p.m. here, we have a few different things. Now, I personally think that this is a good time for you to be able to have a little bit of flexibility in what is that you do. It's just that you want to make sure that you do it, right? So I would say at least 1 hour of your day should be spent learning customer service, conservation, and managing your book. Okay. Okay, 1 hour a day in conservation, managing your book. Now, obviously, when you first get started, you might not have that big of a book of business, so it doesn't really feel like it's that important. But essentially, what we want to start to get good at is just learning the ins and outs of the business itself. And that might be which carriers to go with. That might be what are the pros and cons. That might be doing an application with a carrier. That might be applying for a carrier. All those stuff is essentially working on the business, right? So earlier we talked about the prospecting time being working in the business, money-making activities, right? MMA. If you're now working on the business, then there needs to be some time in managing your book of business. Now, of course, as you start producing more and as you start getting better, the idea would be that you're going to focus now on conservation, right? So you get a pre-lapse, you get a lapse notification, right? You get some sort of email from the carrier saying, hey, you need to do X, Y, Z because this policy is in underwriting, right? And essentially what you want to try to do is just get good at the admin work. Now, as you're doing it though, of course, you can use the AI that we're going to have trained to have it answer questions. You can call into the carrier and have them walk you through certain things. You can, ask your uplines, of course. But the idea is that you're improving on the business so that when we talk about the back end, and if you haven't already gone over this in the interview with your upline, essentially whenever you resubmit a policy, right? So let's say a policy goes lapsed. If I actually resubmit that policy, I will get a whole new issued premium, right? A whole new upfront advance check. On top of that, of course, there's bonuses, right? So we have production bonus that comes from FFL. We have quarterly bonuses that comes from the carriers. And so essentially when you work on your customer service, you're actually adding to your top line revenue, not just your bottom line, right? It's not just customer service. You're actually getting a whole new issue check. And now in some carriers, and you'll learn this, is that they're a little bit harder to deal with than others as far as doing that customer service. And so what you want to start to do is get a feel of personally your opinion. How do you like working with one carrier versus another? Because real talk, every broker has preferences on carriers, processes, and everything else. So what you want to start to do is not just use the AI, not just use the trainings, but start to actually get a feel for it yourself, right? So I'd say 1 hour of policy conservation in managing your book of business, your carriers, persistency, all of that. And actually, I do want to touch on that really quickly. We're going to do a deep dive later, but at the end of the day, guys, all sort of marketing, all sort of lead generation, anything that you can think of that is 1-to-1 ratio eventually compresses with time, right? Well, I should say compresses a scale, right? If I have customer service people, if I have HR people, if I have an accountant, if I have all this and that, because I'm spending money and I'm making more money and it's great, but those margins will continue to compress. The only thing that will not continue to compress is referrals, right? And so essentially, if you white glove these clients and you take good care of them, they are of course going to lead to more and more clients. But as opposed to it being a linear growth, which is, I spend $1, I get $1. Instead, it's compound. And if you want, take a second, pause this video, go to ChatGPT or go to Google and say, if I just got 1.1 referrals, right? So every person I sold, I got 1.1. So, of those 10 people, I get one referral. And plug that in over the course of a year to 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And essentially, you'll realize very quickly, if you can average 1.1 referrals per sale, then you will never need to market again. You'll never need to buy another lead again. You'll never need to buy another lead pack or market yourself or do anything else if you just do that. And so the biggest thing you need to do is just focusing on this part of your business and get comfortable with it and treat it as truly as feedback to your business, whether that's learning more about it or learning more about your customers and their feedback with your sales process and then improving it from there. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to spend at least 1 hour on to-dos, okay? So obviously we have lives, right? And at this point, you see the schedule, like, do we? Yes, you do. Remember, we always have flexibility, and so we can always change this if we need to. But to-dos is really important because at the end of the day, the to-dos are what's going to keep you afloat. It's what's going to keep you sane. It's what's going to keep you, in this race for the long haul. And if you just put off your personal life to-dos and all you ever focus on is this business, then of course you're going to burn out. You're going to blame the business, and you're going to quit. And so make sure you're setting this time aside. Now, when I say 1 hour, though, I really do mean this. That there's a lot of people that will say their to-dos take a while, and sometimes they do, of course, right? There's reality, but most of the time what I find is that people, what they do is they'll take that to do, and because they felt like doing it at 9 a.m. when they had the most energy, that's when they actually do it, right? Versus the money making activities. And so just like I was telling you to be super strict about how much time you give to that allotment for MMA or money making activities, I also want to I want to challenge you to give yourself only an hour for that to do as well, because just like we said at the beginning, if I give myself an hour, I will take an hour. And sometimes those to-dos might actually take longer, in the sense of, okay, well, I didn't finish it today, so I got to work on it again tomorrow. Okay, sure. Like, go ahead and work on it again tomorrow, but work on it at that specific time, right? Then the next thing, of course, is just like lunch, right? So go take lunch, go touch grass, right? Go ahead and get recentered for the rest of the day. Now, I have two opinions on this. One is that when I'm at my most focused, my most locked in, personally, I'm actually eating lunch at my desk. I find that if I step away for too long, it's really hard for me to get locked back in. I'm gonna leave that as a personal preference. I know some people really need to take that time, go to the gym, touch grass, whatever they need to do, right? Because I want you guys to go ahead and take that lunch break. I want you to, again, take it seriously and make sure that you're treating it as active recovery, right? Know that part of the game, whether it's sports or business or anything else, part of the game is actually being proactive and being intentional about the recovery that you do so that you can play the game for the long run, right? And then, of course, last thing here would be training, right? Training. Okay. Now, if you spend these good 4 hours every single day, one, getting your crap together, right? One is lunch and grass and just making sure that you're, of course, hitting that reset button every day. One is in training and you're sharpening axe. And then one is in managing your book of business and just managing what is the back end of your systems and processes to make sure that you manage your book properly, right? And so this right here is the formula. But like I said, same thing with the MMA. You have to take this seriously, right? If you don't, what's going to end up happening is that when you get to the second half of the day, which is, this is the middle part, right? When you get to the second half, you're then going to be doing those to-dos, or you're going to be doing those to-dos tomorrow morning or whatever. And then you're going to wonder why you're not making sales. And it's because you're spending time that you should be spending on MMA and you're spending it on business time, not in business time. And it's incredibly important that you separate these two and that you're doing the inputs while people are at work, while it's the worst time to get pickups, so that when you get back into the second half, you feel refreshed, rejuvenated, and of course, you're not left behind with all the other stuff that you've been, leaving on the table and not getting handled. So this is the second part to the day here, or I should say the middle parts of the day, right? And so second half, I will say right now as a team, we have been crushing it. We are definitely a second half team from what I've seen so far. However, personally, I'm more of a first half kind of guy in general, so maybe that'll change. So we got second half day, right? Now the second half of the day typically is a good idea, since we're doing trainings from 4 to 5. Typically you would want to start your day, or start your second half of your day anywhere from between 4 and 5 p.m., depending on training, how that's going and how fast it is. So anywhere between 4 and 5 p.m., okay? Now, of course, same thing here, though. You have to remember that, again, these people, majority of them, East Coast time, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same exact thing at that 5 o'clock mark, right? We're doing the EST. Oh. Okay, right. Well, my marker sucks right now. 6 p.m. Right, we're going to do CST. 7 p.m. MST. And then 8 p.m. PST. Now remember though, of course, all of these people up until 8 o'clock for the East Coast time, all these people, of course, are, you have the ability to call without being in any legal trouble. And so, of course, what we want to make sure that you guys do is that we are pushing again till 9 o'clock at least every night, okay? 9 p.m. And why is that? Because at the end of the day, even though we're calling these people when they get off work, most people don't actually get home and settled until 6 p.m. their time. So essentially that would just mean that we still would have the East Coast leads on when we're dialing the CST leads, right? So the EST leads are still in there. Then we go to there, so we take the EST leads off. Now we have CST and MST. Same thing. We go to MST and PST. We keep the MSTs, right? So we keep the last list that was on there, and then we go, of course, all the way until 9 p.m. at night. Now, when it comes to the power dialing and when it comes to the prospecting, the same thing applies that we talked about earlier in the morning, is that it's just the time to focus, right? And so, again, so many people just don't take care of what they need to, whether that's first thing in the morning or whether that's in the middle of the day. And so essentially what they end up doing is they end up using that prospecting time, the money-making activity time, and they wonder why their business isn't growing, right? And it's pretty easy. It's just you're not putting enough time and energy into getting the reps and the feedback that you're going to need to get good at this. Okay. Next thing here would be the 9 p.m., right? So now that we're at 9 p.m. here, now, I'm going to let you guys know this right now. This is incredibly important. We talk about this. A lot of you guys come from my old captive agency, where in that captive agency, USHA, right? People would push till 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, midnight sometimes, right? So I already know that a lot of you guys already know what it's like to push that hard for that long for a year plus straight. And so I want to just mention here that personally, I think that 9 p.m. is a good time so that you can run the race and have some balance in life and have some, some sort of sanity. That's part of the reason why you left. However, with that being said, there is a season of balance that comes after a season of unbalance. And so if you're saying to yourself, well, Zach, I watched your video and your video said to get off at 9 o'clock, so that's when I got off, then you're missing the point of this. The point is to show you what I personally do to maintain a pace that I move at. But there might not be maintenance. Maybe you need to go ahead and crash and sleep all day on a Sunday. Guys, we're becoming millionaires here, right? And so of course it would make sense that, you'd be uncomfortable, that you'd be working longer hours. And frankly, the real talk is that the last brokerage we came from, the only state we could really sell in that was even PST was Nevada, right? Now you have access to California, every other PST time state, but you even have access to Alaska and Hawaii, right? Which technically means, legally speaking, you can actually dial until 2 a.m. And I'm not saying to do that, but what I am saying is that if you're not seeing the results that you need to see and you're wondering about what commissions I need to get, try to look for the edges, right? So what do I mean? Well, if I were to tell you, hey, I'm going to give you 100 leads, okay, but 100 other agents are going to work those leads at the same time as you. Instead, I said, hey, I'm going to give you 10 leads, but all 10 leads of those are completely yours and no one's ever touched them. Which one would you rather have? Right? And most people will tell me I would rather have the 10 leads. And the reason why is because when we know instinctively that division is more powerful than addition, right? Mathematically speaking, if I have 100 agents dialing 100 leads, they're going to burn through those leads so fast, right? And so the idea is that if you find yourself in a tough spot, I want you to remember that some of the best prospecting hours sometimes have nothing to do with this schedule in the middle of the day or the nighttime or whatever. What's most important is that other people aren't dialing. Other people aren't working those leads. Other people aren't calling them. And so if you start conversations with people, like for instance, the amount of people I've talked to in Hawaii at 10 o'clock at night or at 11 o'clock at night, they are some of the happiest, most grateful clients that I've ever had. Why? Because no one calls them, right? They get a Hawaii lead, and then by the time that it comes in, it's 6 a.m. in the morning, so they don't want to call them. Then they forget about the lead, and then now it's 9 o'clock and they're done. But in that person's time zone, it's like 3 p.m. there. It's like 2 p.m., whatever, right? And so one thing to just keep in mind is that if you're not where you need to be, then again, back to what I said at the beginning of this training, is that it would make sense that you're going to have to do more energy and more effort than the person ahead of you to catch them. So don't expect, just because you watch this video, that now is 9 o'clock and everybody shuts off. If you see people push until 10 o'clock, and if you're pushing until 10 o'clock, expect to be celebrated. Because at the end of the day, like that is the idea, that's the function, is that you embrace this season of imbalance, you embrace the season of hard, so that you can live the rest of your life as balanced, as opposed to day-to-day balance, right? And so if you have to come in tomorrow a little bit tired, so be it, right? Get your rest on the weekends and reset then if you need to. All right, so let's go back to it. So 9 o'clock here for me is when I do my bedtime routine, okay? Bedtime routine. Now, I personally think that this might actually be the most underrated, overlooked, and potentially even the most important time of the entire day. And I say that because every time that I have been consistent with my bedtime routine, whether that's laying out my clothes, of course, taking care of myself, like shower, brush teeth, tongue scrape, all the floss, that's cool too. But specifically when it is that I'm preparing for the next day, right? So I'm writing out all my to-dos. I'm calendaring out them on the to-dos, not random times throughout the prospecting day, right? I'm fitting it in how long I think it's going to take me, and I'm putting it in, right? I'm on top of that as well, is I'm also making sure that meal prep is done if it hasn't already been done for the weekend, so I know exactly what I'm going to be eating for the day. And most importantly, and I think this is the biggest thing here, is that I'm getting good sleep, right? It is so important. We talked about it in the morning session earlier, but it is so important that you get good sleep, guys. And so essentially, this is some of the things that I personally do to get good sleep. So if you haven't already, looked into it, I would recommend it. First thing that you want to do, of course, is just invest into an eye mask, okay? Why? Because unless you have some sort of blackout curtains, or if you have some sort of way in which you can block out all light. Personally, I'm in a studio high-rise over the city, so it's almost impossible, to block out all light. So I'll get an eye mask, right, because it keeps you awake. Next thing would be mouth tape. If you want to look into the science of it, feel free. But breathing through your nose all night is incredibly much more healthy for you, and it will leave you way more alert. Next thing I will do is I will take a hot to cold shower. And by the way, this might feel extreme, right? This might feel like, okay, this is just a lot just to go to sleep. But let's be real here. We're entrepreneurs, right? We are business owners. And so I don't know about you, but it is hard sometimes to turn my brain off with the amount of ideas and innovation and new things and all that other stuff that we can work on. And so if you don't have a very, dialed in way to get good sleep every single night, you really need to invest in that, right? Sometimes that's controlling your environment, right? So no screens, no screens, 2 hours before sleep, right? So if I get off at 9, then by 11 o'clock, I'll be asleep, right? And then by 11, of course, wake up at 6 a.m., there's your 8 hours, right? But so no screens, of course, right? Now, no screens 2 hours prior. Now, just to be safe, because you'll have a monitor that might be on your iPad, a phone, or whatever. One of the best things that you could possibly do in investing on yourself to make sure of this, to make sure that this doesn't hurt you, is investing in some blue light glasses. Okay, blue light glasses. Now, personally, I think you should be getting the red tinted ones, but it is drastic with how much more tired and how much more your brain feels exhausted after watching that, because essentially blue light is sunlight, right? It's literally the same exact UV rays as sunlight minus the SPF, and it's designed for your brain to look at it and think it's looking at the sun, and therefore reset your circadian rhythm and keep you awake for longer. And so with that blue light glasses, especially the red tinted ones, you're going to, of course, negate that effect. The last thing I will say is this, is because we're all human here, I think you should be investing in what's called brick. Now, brick is essentially what I have found to be the only thing that actually works for me. I have tried, because of my ADD, I have probably a compulsive disorder a little bit, in the sense of I will just doom scroll, right? Just probably like most people. And that doom scrolling can keep you up for so long, hit after hit after hit of dopamine. You wake up exhausted, you wake up tired. And so one of the most important things that you can do is lock your phone from those bad apps. Now, me personally, though, I have gotten into, I would say I've broken into every single app that I can think of. I've probably downloaded 5 or 6, and I've gotten into every single one of them. The only one that I can't seem to figure out, which is good, right? That's the whole point, is Brick. Brick is essentially this little square. Actually, I'm going to go grab it for you real quick. Little square. And essentially what this is for is you can tap your phone, right? Like a tap pay. You tap your phone on this, and then while you tap your phone, it's locking all the bad apps. And so the only way to get into your phone now is to tap your phone on it. Now, so what I do is I keep that over by the door, out of sight, out of mind. If you find that that's not enough, then the next thing I would do is just get a lockbox, and then essentially a time lockbox, right? And so you put the brick in the time lockbox, and so now every bad app is just forcibly locked away for that period of time. And again, you might say, Zach, that's extreme, but the idea is that we are controlling our environment. And I famously love this quote. Alex Hormozi says this all the time. I love this, which is, he's quoting somebody else, but he essentially says that there's an old saying, there's an old adage, which is, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And Alex says very famously, false. If I take that horse, right, and I bring it near a bed of water, and then I starve it, and then I dehydrate it because I give it like salt, and I leave it in the sun for 24 hours, I can variably and virtually guarantee you that horse will drink water. And so many times I think we are so caught up in sometimes our why, sometimes we're caught up in how we feel that day, we're caught up in what's been going on in our lives, we're caught up in the self-identity and all this stuff about can I do it, can I make it work, and none of that really matters. I mean, obviously it does matter, but it all starts with behavior. It all starts with you changing your behavior. And then when you change your behavior, your evidence of who you are changes. And because the evidence of what you does changes, then your self-identity changes. So that's how you actually get into rhythm. That's how you change who you are. That's how you get to the next level. So you start with action despite how you feel, right? Not beforehand. And so if you find that this is extreme, then it might mean that you have some pushback to this because you probably don't really want to change. You probably don't want to do what it takes to actually make a difference. And so many people will hide behind a guise of, this kind of moral, hierarchy of like, well, I shouldn't need that. It's like, okay, but do you? Are you doom scrolling? Because if you are, then do it. Like it costs, $50 for the brick, and it costs like $10 for the lockbox, $60 to make sure that you get great sleep every single night. That's going to save you, hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially millions of dollars in your entire lifetime for a single investment, right? And so I think all that really matters is the work getting done. Is the thing that you want to happen happening? If it's not, then what extreme do you need to take to make it happen? And the cool part is this is when you control your environment, it controls your behavior. When you control your behavior, it controls the evidence of your behavior. The evidence of your behavior then changes your identity. So it's really easy, actually, if you want to change who you are and how you see yourself, to just start controlling your environment and at least doing everything you can for it, right? So brick, I'll put here, plus lockbox. Okay. Last thing here, of course, I'll just put out here is just going to be, putting out my to-dos for the day, right? Making sure that I don't just wake up, what am I going to do today, right? Also getting on there magnesium. If you don't know already, magnesium is very, very good. Helps you sleep, helps you recover. I think it's magnesium thritrate. Don't quote me on this. I'm not a nutrition. But there's a certain type of magnesium that's best. And so essentially this is it. There's a few other things I won't mention on here, of course, but for the most part, this really is my bedtime routine. And this allows me to, of course, get into that deep sleep that allows me to wake up with so much energy and gratitude. So I do this every single day, and this is my 5 days a week routine. Now, I will just let you guys know, if I personally was not a leader, right? Let's say I was just a producer and I only wanted to just produce and produce, which, sometimes every now and then, not gonna lie, I think about it. But the biggest thing that I would say is that you want to try to work when leads are working, right? Or not working, I should say, right? But when leads are available. And so let's get into the weekend schedules, right? So when we get into the weekend, schedule for weekend. And again, I want to preface here, this is my schedule. This is not necessarily what I'm telling you to do, but I am telling you that I can't tell you the truth. I can only tell you my truth, right? And so if you were to follow the schedule and you were to listen to the coaching and you were to implement the advice and you were to do the inputs, I can virtually guarantee you success, right? So the next thing here would be a schedule for the weekend. Now, I'm just going to keep it 100 with you, right? Like businesses, right? If I look at, other than Chick-fil-A, if I look at restaurants in general, right? Or if I look at businesses in general, if I look at anything really that is successful, it would be crazy for you. I mean, think about how crazy it is that the restaurant of Chick-fil-A closes on Sundays, right? An entire company closes one day a week, and we think it's like the most insane thing ever, right? We talk about it, we make songs about it, we advertise about it, we give them praise for it just because of the Christian values or whatever, right? But it's such a big deal, and that's because it's so against what it is and that it takes to build a business. And so instead of trying to focus on the exception of the rule, let's focus on the rule and realize that as business owners, we're probably going to need to work weekends, okay? And when I say probably, I just want to let you know, if you're the first 3 months of this business, and maybe even the first 9 months, and you're not working at least a half day on the weekend, I can almost virtually guarantee you that you won't be successful at this, mainly for the reason that you don't really want it. And now that's going to be, I know it's harsh because then some people say, well, I have family, I have friends, whatever. But here's the thing, if you're a producer, hell, even a leader, if you want to build your team this way, then you will find the time by making it up in other places, right? So for instance, for me, if I were a solo producer, I personally know that Saturdays and Sundays are by far the best time to prospect and sell deals. By far, not even close. And so because I know Saturdays and Sundays are the best days, personally as a leader, I still work the half day Saturday, take off Sunday, all because the rest of my team is working during the week. But if I were a solo producer, I would probably be taking off every Friday, honestly, and then I would immediately go work a full day Saturday, maybe even and a half day Sunday, right? And so Friday would all of a sudden become like my Sabbath, would be my time, my break. And it honestly would be really good, right? Because some people are hanging out late night Friday, so I can get a little bit of my social time in if I need to. But throughout the day, actually the banks are open, everything's open, right? And so I can get all my errands done. I can live my life throughout the day. And I would have nobody, because everybody else is working during the middle of the day. No one's going to be bothering me. No one's going to be hitting me up. No one's going to be asking me to do, paid events and paid things, because at the end of the day, we shouldn't really be spending that much money anyways. We're building a business. We got to reinvest. We got to build this, right? We got to build the engine that is this business. So essentially, I just want to reiterate this here, that I personally, if I were a producer, would only be, I would be taking off Fridays. I'd be working full day Saturdays, and then I'd be working a half day Sunday. Okay. But that being said, if you're going to follow the normal, structure that more or less most brokers do, essentially what you want to think about on Saturdays here is we want to do half days. Now, I like to think of these half days as a little bit more flexible. Reason being is that there isn't really, on Saturday, there really isn't a super bad time to call these people. I would say anything before 9 a.m. On the East Coast side might be a little too early. But other than that, or their time zone, but other than that, it's really kind of a free-for-all. And it is also an incredible time to call, missed appointments, follow-ups, all of that, because essentially, with those people, that this is when they were at work and now they're no longer there. So what I would recommend is, of course, setting it up your day so that you would actually have it where maybe anywhere from 9 to 10 a.m. you get started. And then we do another 4 to 5 hour block of prospecting. Okay. 4 to 5 hour block of prospecting, and then another 1 to 2 hours on business. Okay. So whether that's maybe you're doing a meeting with me, and getting some one-on-one time, maybe that is you're working on some automation. Maybe you're working on your text messages to improve, the show rate for your appointment. Maybe you're working on your Calendly. Maybe you're working on your website. Maybe you're working on, whatever it might be, or training, or learning a new carrier, getting a new pitch, all this stuff, right? This is the time. And you really should have, if you don't have the things that you're working on, that tells me already right out the gate that you're really not giving this a lot of thought, and you're probably subconsciously planning your exit, not your ascension. And so overall, I will say this, like Saturday for me is an amazing day because typically what I will do is it's my project day, right? Now, again, I'm a leader, so this is different for me, but I'm there for the team, help to coach and help. But this is when I do my deep dive work. This is the stuff that it takes a lot of focus for me. And so essentially that is what my main focus is on Saturdays as a leader. Now, if I have time though, of course I'm going to prospect. But again, for you, especially when you first start out, I need you guys to focus on the prospecting because it is so damn good of a time. Okay. Then we get to Sunday here. Again, this is me personally. Sundays is where I take off. But when I take off, and this is very important here, I put Sude, don't judge. Whenever it is that I do Sundays, a lot of people decide that they want to just veg and doom scroll. And as I mentioned earlier, in this business, in business in general, in sports, in anything athletic, whatever, if you want to be the best, if you want to be great, you need to look at rest as part of the business, okay? Because if I work out day in, day out, and I never get good sleep, and I never eat my protein, I never actually take time to relax my muscles and get sleep and protein and all this fulfillment, then I'm not actually going to grow muscle. I'm actually going to lose muscle, right? I'm going to be breaking it down and breaking it down and breaking it down. And I'm never going to actually be building it up. So at the end of the day, whenever it is that you're on your Sundays, I want you to look at it as active recovery, right? Active recovery. Or like I said, swap it out, make it a Friday, don't care, right? But active recovery is super important. And so what's a few ways that you can actively recover? Well, so obviously the real obvious one is take a nap, get some sleep. Now, I will say, to touch on that real quick here, your circadian rhythm, which is, remember we talked about earlier, is by far the most important thing as far as your sleep cycle goes. Like hands down, not even close, circadian rhythm, right? And so when you go to bed and when you wake up at the same time every day, I challenge you on this. I implore you on this. So many people on the weekends will stay up till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, and then they wonder why the rest of the week they can't wake up on time. They crash, right? They pass out. And they all, for some weird reason, they just assume that because they can sleep in on a Saturday and Sunday, that all of a sudden now makes it easy for their bodies to adjust and adapt. It doesn't. It actually throws your cycle off. Saturdays and Sundays are no other different than any other day. So if you treat your sleep schedule the same way that you treated it on the weekend as you treat it on the weekends or weekdays, I promise you, you're going to have an incredibly more productive time. So if you need to sleep in an extra hour, right, instead of 6 a.m., sleep into 7, that's fine. But I really, really implore you not to go crazy on the weekends, especially the first 3 to 6 months of this business. You need every advantage possible. So active recovery, again, good sleep, right? It's super important. If you're going to take a nap, please don't take it past 2 p.m. Your body will reset. And so, of course, it's going to make it hard to keep that circadian rhythm. And then this is where I will get, now me personally, I now outsource this stuff, but this is where we would meal prep so we can save money and more importantly, save time, which saves money, right? We're going to meal prep, we're going to clean, laundry, probably cardio. I'm a big cardio guy on Sunday because, of course, again, I'm trying to exhaust the body, right? I'm trying to actually get into that recovery as far as just like my body being calm, relaxed. And so I'll do some sort of hard cardio on Sundays. And then, of course, spend time with my devotional, right? With church, with, people in general. But again, what's most important is that we're resetting the day. And now the last thing I want to put on here for Sundays is basically just setting up the week, right? What are your goals? What are your intentions? And what it is that you are trying to actually accomplish and why, right? Setting this up for the week, like if you go into every single week, just what am I going to do this week, right? Without any goals, without any intentions, you are a freaking blind mouse hoping to find cheese. And of course you don't find cheese because you don't even have a goal to set. You don't even have inputs. And here's the thing, when you set these goals, I want to make sure that it's super important. I just said that is these goals should not necessarily, until you have a system that can provenly show you a certain amount of AV or AP every single week, until that actually happens, I want you to set your goals based on inputs, right? Inputs. What are the dials? What's my talk time, right? What's my schedule going to be like? And then those things, that is where I set my goals. That is where I set my expectations for myself. That is where I get my confidence from. And that is where I get my success and fulfillment from. If I do those things correctly, while also being coached and trained by the person who is on the other end of this camera, who's letting you onto the team, making sure that you're good enough for it, then there's just no reason why you wouldn't be successful. Where people get in trouble is that they'll set goals for things they can't control. And so then therefore they're upset or, dismayed or whatever, whenever it doesn't work out. Right. And then that upsetness, that, negativity bleeds into their next call and it gets it more and more of the same versus getting your self-worth and versus getting your actual attention, to yourself, essentially, like your self-respect, getting that from the inputs. Okay. So this is my schedule for the weekend. This is essentially the schedule for success. Now, again, not telling you the truth, I'm telling you my truth, but I can tell you that people who have followed this schedule have been incredibly successful on the team, doing well over $250,000 a year, someone in the upwards of $400,000 to $500,000 a year. So if you're interested about learning more about your schedule and you want to get a little bit of advice on how to go about, cultivating your schedule, maybe keeping it accountable, right? Some sort of way of tracking it and helping you out with that, let us know. Happy to help you out with that, and book a link, down below, and I will see you in the next training.